Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, or excuse me, getting ahead of myself, Tuesday, March 10th. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Welcome to the Government, Labor, and Election Law Committee. I am Chair Wells, joined by my Vice Chair, Delegate Ken Kerr. So thank you all for being here. Just as a reminder, bill sponsors are not timed. However, witnesses are. So we ask our bill sponsors to be courteous of their time that they use with us, but we understand how important your bills all are. And with that, we will begin with our first bill of the day, HB 1488, Delegate Jones and Lieutenant Governor and our Visitor General as well. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones, representing District 30A in the House of Delegates. I also have the honor of being president of the Women's Caucus of Maryland, for which the bill before you that I am presenting is a Women's Caucus priority piece of legislation. Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee, I'm here today to introduce HB 1488, Constitutional Language Modernization. This legislation is straightforward, impactful, and timely. Currently, Maryland is fortunate to have 4 out of 7 executive branch constitutional offices held by remarkable women. Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller, Comptroller Brooke Learman, Secretary of State Susan Lee, and Adjutant General Major General Janine Burkhead. These women are outstanding, capable leaders who serve Maryland with dedication and integrity. However, our state constitution still refers to these offices in a way that presumes the office holders are male. This constitutional amendment would modernize Maryland's constitution by correcting this outdated language. Instead of using male pronouns such as he, the language would remove the pronouns and refer to office holders by their title. For example, rather than saying he shall in reference to the comptroller, it would read the comptroller shall. This bill would similarly change other references that, by default, do not represent all Marylanders. 9 other states have already made this change, including North Carolina and Utah. It is important to me, as it is all members of this committee, that everyone feels empowered and inspired to serve their state through elected office. In the most recent election, Maryland elected 3 women to serve in the United States Congress. Additionally, 30% of our senators and 45% of our delegates are women. We are incredibly fortunate to have such diversity in our elected leadership. As children to adults learn and read the Maryland Constitution, it seems essential that the language in our founding documents reflect the reality that anyone can hold the office. As you will see in your floor system, I am so very proud to have the support of Governor Moore, Lieutenant Governor Miller, Comptroller Learman, Attorney General Brown, Secretary of State Susan Lee, and Adjutant General Burkhead. And I have to take a moment of gratitude to say how honored I am and proud to have our amazing Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller and our Adjutant General Burkhead today here with me on my panel. Thank you both so very much. And with that, I respectfully urge a favorable report on HB 1488.
Madam Chair, if it's okay, I have my shadow here for the day, Corey Ibrahim, and she comes from the foster youth from Harford County. And what I wanted her to know is that she doesn't need to be a shadow for anyone. I want her to be in the limelight, that she is the light, and I hope it's okay that she be here sitting beside me. Thank you. So good afternoon, Madam Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the House Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. For the record, I am Aruna Miller, Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. I'm honored to be here today to testify in support of House Bill 1488, Constitutional Language Modernization. Foremost, let me offer my heartfelt congratulations to each one of you on the new formation of the GLEE Committee. And in many ways, the creation of your committee reminds us of something simple. Change is a constant in our lives. Each of us are here for a brief moment in time, entrusted by the voters of Maryland as stewards of the institutions and the laws that guide them, with profound responsibility to leave them stronger than when we found them. And when I think about that duty, I can't help but reflect on our Constitution and how many times it has changed since it was ratified in 1867. Over the past 159 years, Maryland voters have approved more than 200 amendments to our Constitution. And in 1970, through a constitutional amendment, the voters created the office of the Lieutenant Governor of Maryland to ensure continuity of leadership and a clear line of succession. So this is what an amendment looks like. I remain personally and forever grateful to serve the people of this great state in this capacity. But more importantly, I'm deeply grateful for the many amendments that this body has advanced over the years and to have entrusted the voters of Maryland that strengthen our Constitution so it reflects the ideals of the people it serves. House Bill 1488 continues that work because throughout our Constitution, those who hold public office are still described as he, language that reflects a very different time in our history. Today, women in leadership across every level of the government in our state, they serve in our state. We serve as legislators, judges, military leaders, and as constitutional officers. As you heard from Delegate Dana Jones, in fact, today, 4 of Maryland's 7 constitutional offices are held by women, something that would have been hard to imagine when our Constitution was first written. On January 18, 2023, when I was sworn in as Lieutenant Governor, I became only the 2nd woman in Maryland's history to hold that position and the first immigrant and woman of color elected statewide. Now that says more about Maryland than it does about me, that voters are electing more women, more members of the LGBTQ community, and people from other marginalized groups than ever before. And yet, when you open the Maryland Constitution, the office I hold and all the ones across 3 branches of our government are still described with the word he. House Bill 1488 simply brings our Constitution into alignment with the Maryland that we live in today. House Bill 1488 doesn't determine who can serve. Maryland voters have already answered that. What it does is that it updates our founding document so it reflects the full diversity of the people who serve Maryland. So yes, it's about accuracy, and frankly, it's just common sense. I know every member of this committee wants every young person who reads our Constitution to see themselves in our democracy, not just as citizens, but as those who will one day shape our laws, interpret them, enforce them, and lead those who defend our state. Every generation has a choice. Leave democracy smaller than when we found it, or make it bigger. A Constitution is not just a record of the past. It's a guide for the future and to speak to all Marylanders. And during Women's History Month, I want to thank the sponsor of this legislation, the president of the Women's Caucus, Delegate Dana Jones, for bringing this very important bill forward. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I respectfully ask for a favorable report for House Bill 1488. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells, Chair Kerr, and members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony in support of House Bill 1488, Constitutional Language Modernization. I am Major General Janine L. Burkhead, the Adjutant General of the Maryland Army and Air National Guard Forces. I am responsible for more than 6,000 uniformed Guard members committed to serve the people of Maryland and to defend the nation. 20% of them are women. This bill is not about you or me. It is about the signal that government sends to young men and women serving in our state and nation today. It is about our daughters and our granddaughters. It is for all of those who deserve to know that there are no subtle signals dismissing their roles in the Maryland National Guard, or for that matter, for their future roles as they participate in Maryland state government. This bill is an opportunity to authorize accuracy in our language. As one of nearly 200 constitutional amendments, it reflects the reality. In 2008, a constitutional amendment was passed to authorize video lottery license to raise revenue for public school education. That concept was unthinkable in 1867 when the Maryland Constitution was ratified. In 2026, this constitutional amendment will authorize neutral pronouns and references to the office of the title. The concept that voters or elected officials would not be men was unthinkable in 1867 when the Maryland Constitution was ratified. This bill reflects the evolution that has already taken place. House Bill 1488 will not change history. It will not weaken tradition. It will send a clear signal that Maryland government is the right and responsibility of all Marylanders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The bill sponsor to our Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller, Adjutant General Janine Burkhead, and also to Ms. Corey Ibrahim. Thank you for being here. Opening up for questions from the committee, Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with you that we have a lot of women in the state of Maryland that we should be very proud of. I guess my question is, you want to change any reference to man to person, and then every him, his to them, their, or that person. Why not just have it as him or her, or when you use him, his as her, hers, or man/woman, rather than just making a generic person? If you're worried about them using him or mankind, why not be more descriptive in we are talking about either a man or a female, a man or a woman?
I just wanted to make sure not to interrupt you.
Sure, you're good.
To let you finish. Thanks so much for that question. We do not change every him or his to person. So that's not actually in the more than 29 pages. We change every office holder's his, right? The majority of that to the office holder's name. You will see in your floor system, instead of saying the comptroller, he, it says the comptroller, the comptroller, the comptroller. In places where it is, and I'm sure just like me, you still have your MLA college handbook back home on your shelf. Many times you know that it is the plural pronoun for multiple people. So in multiple places, it might say there, but that is because it is a plural pronoun. And you can also see that throughout.
But you wouldn't be changing that.
Excuse me?
But you wouldn't be changing that. What would you be changing
No, I did.
to replace there?
No, it says his, and then it would say there, because it's a plural pronoun. So the majority of this bill, as you scroll through, sir, you can see that we are going through and just modernizing so that it would talk about the office holder and instead of saying him, him, him.
And is that what North Carolina, you mentioned North Carolina and Utah, is that what they did? They put.
Yes, actually Utah went to a ballot measure and it overwhelmingly passed. There are multiple states that have already done this. Both, if you're getting to the question, yes, there is equal number red and blue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no further questions from the committee, this concludes our bill hearing for HB 1488. Thank you all so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
We will move on next to HB 1192, Delegate Bagnall. And Delegate Bagnall, I know we will be using a sign language interpreter. They have space up there? I see that we need a S. Other virtual. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Just want to make sure we had space.
We were just texting back and forth.
Perfect. Okay, great. You may begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnall, District 33C, Anne Arundel County, here in strong support of House Bill 1192. You have my written testimony, so I will try to quickly summarize. The impetus for this bill dates back to the passage of House Bill 260 in 2023, the Maryland Sign Language Interpreters Act, which established a licensing and regulatory system for sign language interpreters. This framework was an important step towards strengthening professional standards and ensuring access to qualified interpreting services across the state. The State Board of Sign Language Interpreters has since been established and is working diligently to implement regulations. However, under this previous legislation, some timelines have not been met and issues have arisen that require additional legislative action to rectify. House Bill 1192 realigns deadlines that have not yet been met and provides the board with additional time to achieve compliance. The bill adds more members to the State Board of Sign Language Interpreters, adds reporting requirements and stakeholder input as the board develops regulations related to specialty licensing, and corrects a drafting error in the original legislation. The bill also requires the legislature, the licensure board's membership nomination process to include engaging with underrepresented deaf, deafblind, and interpreter communities to ensure the board makeup reflects the population it serves. I am grateful to the board for its engagement throughout this process and the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And working closely with our Senate partner, we are considering potential amendments to the bill, and I believe we will achieve consensus with the board on its proposals within the next couple of days. House Bill 1192 will put the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and the board in the best position for successful implementation of this important licensing legislation while maintaining access to critical interpretation services across the state. And with that, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 1192, and I will turn it over to my panel.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of House Bill 1192. I'm Hannah Dyer, Deputy Legislative Officer for the Governor. We applaud Delegate Bagnall for sponsoring the Maryland Sign Language Interpreters Act of 2023 in order to require a framework of licensure requirements for sign language interpreters. Governor Moore signed this act into law, and the Moore-Miller administration continues to remain committed to full implementation of sign language licensure in Maryland. Regulating any new industry is difficult, and especially one as deeply personal and consequential as sign language interpretation. As with any regulatory process, we have learned of concerns and issues that merit further input and discussion. House Bill 1192 will realign milestone dates, require certain deliberative and collaborative studies, and bring the board makeup and operations more in line with other similar occupational licensure boards. We are also supportive of the amendments that the sponsor mentioned to make application criteria more flexible and make other clarifying changes. Thank you again to Delegate Bagnall and all of the advocates and stakeholders here virtually today for the dedication to creating this new regulatory process. We believe House Bill 1192 will put the state in a better position for successful implementation of sign language licensure, and we appreciate the continued contributions towards that effort.
Great, thank you so much. We'll go to, we have one virtual for your sponsor panel, Mr. Leffler, excuse me.
Hi there, my name is Jacob Leffler, and I am part of the State Board of Sign Language Interpreters. On behalf of the board, we respectfully submit the testimony regarding HB 1192. My name is Jacob Leffler again, and I serve as a chair of the board since October of 2024, and I'm very proud of the board's work and its efforts to establish regulations for sign language interpreter licensure. To provide a brief background, the board has been working on these regulations since its establishment. Proposed regulations were released for public comment in May, and we received more than 200 comments. In September, the board approved the updated draft for a second round of public comment. The board convened several working groups comprised of subject matter experts. For example, the education work group included 6 educational interpreters who focused on the educational interpreter specialty. The legal work group included 3 legal interpreters and a representative from the judiciary to develop recommendations for the legal specialty. The medical work group also included several experienced professionals. Additional work groups were formed as well. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of these individuals who volunteered their time and expertise to determine what is best for their respective practice areas. After thoughtful consideration, the board decided to place specialty license requirements on hold and instead move forward with implementing the general and provisional licenses, allowing time for those license types to be established and evaluated before adding specialty designations. The only exception is the educational interpreter specialty, which the board continues to develop because many educational interpreters do not currently hold certifications. We appreciate Delegate Bagnell, the bill sponsor, for offering amendments that the board supports. Specifically, the board supports the proposed amendment allowing licensure without certification, which would authorize the board to establish criteria that provide additional pathways to licensure. The board also supports the amendment clarifying that the ex officio member does not have voting authority, as the current quorum language could otherwise be interpreted to grant voting power. Additionally, the board supports the provision requiring the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing to assist with completion of the required report. However, the board remains concerned about the language requiring 2 individuals affiliated with an entity that operates and implements deaf services in educational, legal, or medical settings. As currently written, this language could allow individuals with no knowledge of interpreting or interpreting standards to serve on the board. We are concerned that this could weaken the intent and integrity of the licensure process. If this provision is retained, we respectfully request clarification that these individuals must be interpreters, have proficient experience working with interpreters or deaf individuals in those settings, and be proficient in American Sign Language. Alternatively, we request that the requirement be removed. We request removal of this provision because concerns from these entities regarding specialty licensure are already addressed in the reporting section, which requires the board to consult with stakeholders and conduct a public comment period. For that reason, we do not believe it is necessary to add 2 additional members to the board. We remain committed to working collaboratively on amendments that strengthen the board while protecting consumers and upholding professional standards. For these reasons, the State Board of Sign Language Interpreters position is favorable with amendments, provided that the committee adopts the sponsor's amendments as well as the additional amendments proposed by the board. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Loeffler. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor and the sponsor panel from the committee? Okay. Thank you so much. Seeing none, we'll move on to additional favorable with amendments testimony. We have answered Nikki Woodward, Mary Pat Fannin, Jake Whitaker, and Sam Mathias in person. We can be on this side.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Jake Whitaker on behalf of Maryland's hospitals and health systems in strong support with amendments of House Bill 1192. So Maryland hospitals strongly support establishing a licensure process for sign language interpreters. And we fully support the goal of ensuring deaf and hard of hearing Marylanders have access to qualified interpreters, effective communication, and the best possible care. So our amendments here today are intended to ensure that licensure requirements do not inadvertently limit access to care for the very community that this bill is intended to support. So as written, the current statute allows consumers to choose in-person or video remote services. But if a hospital cannot meet a patient's preference for in-person interpretation, the law would basically prevent us from delivering life-saving care. And so hospitals absolutely want to honor patients' communication preferences, but we just simply cannot risk not being able to deliver life-saving care to Marylanders. And we think this is especially concerning given just the severe shortage of interpreters here in Maryland. There's only about 500 interpreters serving about 1.2 million deaf and hard of hearing Marylanders. And I think this is critically important because hospitals operate about 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and finding an interpreter on weekends, holidays, or overnight can just be impossible sometimes. And I think rural hospitals in particular, especially on the Eastern Shore and in Western Maryland, would face even greater challenges because there's just less interpreters in those jurisdictions. Additionally, Maryland would also be the only state in the nation with such an inflexible mandate, which would unintentionally slow access to care as well. Additionally, hospitals are bound by federal law requiring immediately screening and stabilizing patients that come to the emergency department. So our proposed amendments reflect these practical realities and ensure that interpreter licensure moves forward without jeopardizing access to care. And you have our full set of amendments, which we believe address these and other concerns. And finally, I would just like to conclude that this is not a financial consideration whatsoever. We checked with our members, and it's actually more expensive to provide video remote interpretation services than in person. So this is simply an access to care issue. And for the aforementioned reasons, we respectfully request a favorable report with our amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the committee. My name is Sam Mathias with the Maryland Association of Boards of Education on behalf of 24 local boards of education, favorable with amendments on House Bill 1192. This bill is about establishing a workable path from being a state with no interpreter licensure standards to a state with high standards for sign language interpreters. The goal of the State Board of Sign Language Interpreters should be to support strong licensure standards, promote interpreter quality, and ensure access and continued access for deaf and hard of hearing students, hospital patients, and others who rely on interpreters across the public services in Maryland. MABE strongly supports these goals and for that reason supports this bill with amendments outlined in our joint testimony with PZAM. As the framework for licensure is built, it's important that the burden of change not fall on the deaf and hard of hearing community. And at the same time, the transition cannot place the full burden on the current interpreter workforce without an infrastructure to train, develop, certify, and encourage more interpreters in Maryland. The bill, with its proposed amendments, helps create a structure that balances those interests. There's several components of the bill and our amendments that are especially important. I'm going to talk just about two. First, the reporting requirement before regulations are finalized in the bill. Before adopting regulations, with this bill, the board must examine national certification standards, the number of interpreters currently practicing in Maryland, the impact of specialty licensure on service availability, and one of our proposed amendments, the number of specialty licensed interpreters available in each county. Standards must be informed by workforce reality, and without that data, we risk unintentionally reducing access, particularly for school systems that are already struggling to securing interpreters. Second is board composition. The board should absolutely include members of the deaf and hard of hearing community. Their lived experience is essential. It should also include representatives from schools, hospitals, and courts, and I can get into more, but for those reasons, we support this with amendments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. It's great to say that. My name is Mary Pat Fannin. I'm the Executive Director of the Public School Superintendents Association of Maryland, or PZAM. First of all, we share the goal of elevating standards and strengthening interpreter licensure in Maryland. We've worked closely with our colleagues at MABE and have provided extensive joint testimony with a series of amendments that are important. Today, I'm going to highlight three. First, we support timeline adjustments that have been in the bill. Most importantly, there's a request for uncodified language that would clarify that the board cannot promulgate regulations before the effective date of this bill. As you heard Mr. Loeffler, the board plans to continue their work on the educator licensure regulations after session, but before the effective date of this legislation. This has been our main point of contention for the education community during the initial promulgation process that we've been working on for over 18 months. We believe it's important that the legislation take effect first and then any further regulatory action occur after that with the stakeholder input in the bill. Second, we believe the bill should provide a clearer and more streamlined pathway for obtaining a provisional license, and this should be the board's first order of business. As Sam mentioned, this licensure pathway is new to Maryland, and a scaffolding approach is essential. For school systems, we need to ensure that our current interpreters working with students are able to obtain licensure in a reasonable and timely manner. Third, we want to address the issue of consumer choice. In school settings, this can look somewhat different than what you've heard from Mr. Whitaker. The most important point is that school systems operate under the ADA, which requires that we ensure effective communication and give primary consideration to the preferences of students with disabilities whenever practicable. This is the standard that we follow. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the committee. I am Dr. Nikki Woodward, an early intervention infant toddler specialist from Montgomery County, and I'm currently on loan to serve as the Vice President of Maryland State Education Association. MSEA represents 76,000 members across the state, which also include our educational interpreters. We share the goal of guaranteeing access to qualified interpreters for all those who benefit from their services. And we want to ensure that we are not creating barriers to qualified and experienced educational interpreters serving our students and families. Interpreting services are often essential to both educational equity and compliance with federal law. We have proposed several amendments to support a feasible timeline and reflect workforce shortages, including an amendment to adjust the deadline for interpreters to meet licensure requirements to July of 2028. This would give interpreters time after new requirements are published to seek the necessary credentials, gather documentation, and complete their application. This is especially important if the final requirements include industry licensure tests like the Educational Interpreter Performance Assessment, for which scoring can take up to a year. Our proposed deadline is in July rather than January to avoid potential disruption of new requirements to taking effect mid-school year. We also want to thank the sponsor for an amendment that would allow the board to recognize an interpreter's professional experience towards meeting the licensure requirements. Educational interpreters have dedicated their careers to making learning accessible for young people, and they play an important role in the school's community. We respectfully request a favorable report that includes the amendments in our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have one additional person for favorable with amendments who is virtual, Ms. Tina Joyner. Okay, unfortunately, Ms. Joyner is not able to join us. Opening up for questions from the committee for the favorable with amendments. All right, seeing none, thank you all very much for being here with us today and for your testimony. We'll move on next to our unfavorables, all virtual. We have Vice President C. Boykins, Emily Dittmer, and Liaison S. Abdillah. And Shelby Abdillah, excuse me. Good afternoon, you may begin. Oh, actually, I'm so sorry. VP Boykins, you may begin first.
Apologies, Madam Chair. Would it be okay if our president, or I think our president could go first? Would that be?
I have Emily Dittmer.
Yes.
I have, okay, Ms. Dittmer, you may begin.
And then
Yes.
we do request a slight accommodation because we will speak slightly slower to allow for the interpreting process.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, you won't be time for that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the committee. My name is Emily Dittmer, and I'm the current president of the Potomac chapter of the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. PCRAD is the Maryland and DC affiliate chapter for RAD. Alongside the Maryland Association for the Deaf, of the deaf, PCRID supported the creation and passage of what is now the Maryland Interpreter Licensure Act. Through this process, PCRID's support of interpreter licensure has not changed. However, I testify today on behalf of PCRID with an unfavorable unless amended stance on House Bill 1192. While PCRID is in favor of the change implemented to the amendment regarding the addition of "or" in Section 9-2419 to allow for alternative pathways to certification, the amendment's intent and therefore impact remains. PCRID opposes the addition of 4 government-affiliated board members who are not required to have knowledge of the interpreting profession or sign language proficiency. This change in board composition creates an undue institutional influence and is a departure from the carefully balanced board of the current licensure law, whose members reflect the lived and professional realities of the deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing, deaf-disabled, and interpreting communities. Additionally, PCRID opposes the addition of reporting requirements as they represent a misunderstanding of the landscape of the interpreting profession and impose an unnecessary administrative hurdle to the creation of the specialty licensure standards that protect individuals in highly vulnerable settings, such as legal, medical, and educational. What cannot be ignored are the implications this amendment carries by adding unique structural and reporting barriers on the only Maryland Occupational Licensing Board whose members all represent protected classes and operate professionally and or personally in a language other than English. The time constraints prevent me from detailing PCRID's opposition to the proposed legislation in full. However, PCRID submitted a report as testimony on March 6, 2026, compiled by our Vice President, Carolyn Boykins, identifying each provision of the amendment along with our rationale for opposing. To better understand our unfavorable unless amended position towards this bill, I strongly encourage committee members to read and carefully consider this report as it was written through the lens of subject matter expertise. PCRID remains in full support of interpreter licensure. As such, we are urging the committee to preserve the intent of the original bill to protect the rights of deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing, and deaf-disabled Maryland residents. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dittmer. Ms. Abdillah?
Good afternoon, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the committee. My name is Shelby Abdullahi, and I'm also here on behalf of the Potomac chapter of the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, or PCRID. We represent sign language interpreters in Maryland and DC, and we, along with the Maryland Association of the Deaf, helped craft Maryland's original interpreter licensure law. I'm here to testify unfavorable unless amended on House Bill 1192. PCRID supports licensure, period. In 2023, the General Assembly enacted the Maryland Interpreter Licensure Act as a consumer protection measure after deaf Marylanders testified to real harms in medical, legal, educational, and governmental settings. The law created a balanced 7-member board, which was housed within the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, composed of Maryland residents, proficient in ASL, and reflective of the deaf and interpreting communities. HB 1192 significantly restructures that model. First, we asked the committee to remove the 2 seats for individuals affiliated with entities that operate deaf services in educational, legal, or medical settings. Those entities often contract with interpreters, they bear compliance costs, and they're directly affected by board enforcement. They're not structured to give regulated institutions voting authority over the very standards that govern them. That structure would be inconsistent with how other licensing boards in Maryland operate, and it risks shifting standards from minimum competency to institutional feasibility. Maryland licensing boards are traditionally practitioner-led, and they're consumer-focused. When institutions who are affected by regulation sit on the regulatory body itself, standards can shift towards feasibility rather than that competency. We're also concerned that those members are exempt from the ASL proficiency requirements. With 4 members who are exempt from those requirements, deliberations may shift toward English-dominant discussion, which alters participation and diminishes deaf-centered governance. Institutional input is appropriate, but through stakeholder consultation, not through voting seats. Second, we ask that the committee remove the requirement that the board submit a report at least 60 days before promulgating specialty license regulations. This mandate is atypical. The board is already subject to the Administrative Procedure Act and AELR review. Adding a unique pre-promulgation report delays enforcement and it signals mistrust. That report requires extensive comparative and workforce analysis that does not centrally exist. The lack of that infrastructure is exactly why this licensure was enacted. Third, we support the sponsor's amendment clarifying that the secretaries serve as ex officio non-voting members. However, we respectfully request that clear language be added stating those seats don't count towards quorum. If advisory, they shouldn't affect voting thresholds. We also support the amendment clarifying the alternative qualification pathways. But as drafted, HB 1192 alters board composition in ways that risk institutional influence and impose procedural barriers that delay the specialty licensure. For these reasons, PCRID respectfully urges an unfavorable report unless the 2 affiliated seats and the 60-day reporting requirement are removed and the quorum language is clarified. Minimum competency standards are not administrative burdens. They're safeguards for rights, dignity, and meaningful participation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. VP Boykins.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the committee. I'm here to respectfully request an unfavorable report unless substantially amended on HB 1192. What's done is done. That was the response I received when I alerted the drafters of HB 1192 that significant interpreting errors had occurred during their meetings with deaf community members about these very amendments. What's done is done. Deaf Marylanders' civil rights were violated in front of them through interpreters they had hired and paid for. Yet when I told them there were no questions, no pause to examine what had happened, no concern that their constituents had not actually been heard. Responses like these facilitate ADA violations and create the appearance that the governor's office will allow them to occur in its own meetings. I've been told numerous times that everyone is committed to licensure. If deaf voices were truly central to this bill and successful licensure were truly the goal, and were truly the goal, that moment should have mattered. This should have been a stopping point, and instead the concern was dismissed. We were told that adding ex officio members was necessary because the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing is a small agency needing administrative support and expertise. But the board does not provide administrative support. It is a policy-focused regulatory body. Adding ex officio members does not solve an administrative problem. It changes who holds influence over interpreter licensure policy. While we recognize the limitations of hospitals across Maryland, it must also be noted that the consumer choice preference does not override requirements as listed in the ADA, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, or Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, as federal law already allows providers to stabilize patients using the most immediately available communication method and then transition to a preferred method if and when feasible. Throughout this process, I've now been left with one unavoidable conclusion. Even with the best intentions, these amendments were drafted by individuals who do not have the expertise necessary to assess the issues they aim to resolve. They've demonstrated a troubling lack of understanding regarding the deaf community, the interpreting profession, and a clear disregard for our impact. I cannot emphasize this enough. This bill impacts a deaf person at every touch point of their life. Yesterday, I had a doctor's appointment. I went to the pharmacy, I spoke with a CPA, and met with an attorney. In one day, I interacted with professionals regulated by 4 separate licensing boards. For hearing people, the decisions of an interpreter licensure board may seem small because they may never directly impact them. But for deaf people, interpreter licensure sits in front of every other professional license. Every interaction is mediated through the interpreter's license first, and then the practitioner's license second. This is an experience unique to deaf individuals. From cradle to grave, interpreters are present in the most mundane to the most intimate parts of a deaf person's life. Even on a getaway, such as a cruise, an activity meant to escape everyday life, deaf people must still fight for interpreters to be present. They cannot even take a vacation away from us. Today, you are at work, and I am here testifying about my job. But for deaf people, this is their entire life. We must take this impact seriously, more seriously than political considerations, agency dynamics, or access as a checkbox. The purpose of these amendments is clear: to shift influence and power towards entities that have already demonstrated, even in this process, an inability to properly safeguard deaf people's civil rights. The very entities who testified against licensure in the original bill, the entities who benefit from weak licensure, the entities responsible for the trauma shared on this very floor in 2023, this conflict of interest cannot be ignored. I'm not asking you to hear me. I'm imploring you to listen to the deaf community. History rarely looks kindly on governments that listen to institutions in power instead of the marginalized communities affected. I ask you to listen sooner rather than later, to listen with foresight instead of the hindsight that will come at the harm of these amendments. Maybe what's done has been done, but it can still be corrected. You have the opportunity to ensure that this harm does not continue and instead address the issues presented in a way that is aligned with the values of the state of Maryland and honors the original intent of the bill. I now ask you to do what was not done when I raised this issue with the governor's office. Ask questions, inquire further, start with deaf people, and ensure qualified interpreters are used. Thank you.
Questions for the unfavorable panel? I don't see any. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else to testify on this bill? That concludes the testimony for House Bill 1192. Thank you, Delegate Bagnall. And you are up next with House Bill 1064.
All right. Good afternoon again, Mr. Vice Chair, Honorable Government, Labor, and Elections Committee members. For the record, I continue to be Delegate Heather Bagnall from District 33C, Anne Arundel County, here in strong support of House Bill 1064. This is the Maryland Office of the Inspector General establishment. For nearly 6 years, I have been on a mission to create greater transparency, accountability, and efficiency for our state government and our tax dollars. I started out with a whistleblower bill which established enhanced protections for state employees against retaliatory efforts such as demotion, transfer, or forced early retirement, all of the result of incidents which had occurred in our state. However, as I worked year over year on the effort, the challenge we identified was that we didn't have a centralized and independent body for the investigation and enforcement. Our current whistleblower protections are housed under the Department of Budget Management, who have engaged in better education as we identified this effort of existing protections, but it became clear that employees did not feel comfortable going to a state agency to report on a state agency. We attempted to house the protections under the Office of the Attorney General, but that office is that effort put that office in the position of serving as both the prosecution and defense, because the Attorney General, of course, is the lawyer for the state. So at their suggestion, we considered instead creating a state watchdog by establishing an Office of Inspector General. And last year, serendipitously, I heard the former IG for the state of Indiana speak, and it was the aha moment we needed to move forward. Currently, we have 2 inspectors general for the state of Maryland, one for health and one for education. So House Bill 1064 would establish a centralized state-level Maryland Office of the Inspector General to oversee the functions of the former Maryland, the Maryland Office of the Inspector General for Education and the Maryland Office of the Inspector General for Health. The goal is to streamline oversight efforts and improve accountability, transparency, and whistleblower protections within the state government. The new Office of Inspector General would unify these existing Inspectors General entities into a single statewide office, empowering the Inspector General to review activities within state agencies in a procedurally consistent manner. It would be authorized to conduct investigations and audits, subpoena documents with judicial approval, and refer potential criminal activity to law enforcement agencies, all under a single umbrella. In consultation with multiple states, this bill is modeled after the Indiana Office of the Inspector General, which is considered by many to be the gold standard. House Bill 1064 also expands protections for state employees who report misconduct by extending whistleblower protections to employees who provide information to the OIG. This bill helps ensure they can raise concerns without fear of retaliation. Additionally, the new OIG would be required to issue an annual report to the governor and the General Assembly, allowing policymakers to monitor its progress and outcomes. Now, the benefits of having a centralized state-level OIG are well documented across other states. With the introduction of the state-level OIG in 2005, Indiana saw its total savings and captures from 2005 to 2010 to reach over $14 million, with its operating expenses reaching only about $7 million. Following its introduction in 2005, the OIG reported a 925% increase in reports of wrongdoing compared to its previous model. At its core, House Bill 1064 aims to strengthen public trust in our government agencies by ensuring that concerns about fraud, waste, and abuse and corruption can be investigated in an independent, transparent, and efficient manner before they hit the press. With this, I would thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 1064. I will also mention that there is a set of amendments that's coming in that was just a drafting error that I didn't catch on my part, which includes the expanded whistleblower protections of which I spoke. With that, I would ask for your favorable report on House Bill 1064.
Questions for the chairman of the Health Committee, Delegate Fisher.
Yes, the chairman of the Health Committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Bagnall, I'm curious who currently appoints the OIG?
The OIG for health or education?
Any of them.
So I will be honest, I don't know as much about the OIG for education.
Fair enough.
But the Office of Health, we passed a bill a few years ago to make them an independent body so they no longer serve under the Department of Health.
So this bill would contemplate consolidation of all of these other OIGs into an Office of Inspector General, correct?
It would, and you're going to hear from the, I believe you're going to hear from the Office of the Inspector General for Education about some concerns, and we're working through those. You know, we are very respectfully open to amending the bill to make sure that we're not inadvertently or unintentionally disrupting their
So the OIG consolidation in your bill would be appointed by whom then?
So if you look in the bill, it is actually an appointment process. So there is a.
Is it the governor?
It's the governor, and it's actually the governor. Sorry, I'm just looking for. It actually it's the governor, the treasurer, the comptroller, and at the consent and consultation of the Senate. So it still has an appointment process.
And then I guess I can also ask this question to the next person, but the OIG for education that currently exists, and that would be in this new independent office.
Yes, but we would under it we would retain the umbrella of a statewide office, but we would also retain the currently functioning offices of health and education.
Thank you, Delegate Lehman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A very quick question. Thank you for the bill, Delegate Bagnall. It's interesting. So I see where the term for the Inspector General would be 5 years. Could he or she be renewed, and is there a limit over the long term? If they can be renewed, how many times?
I believe it is a renewable term, but I don't think that we have. I don't think we've articulated term limits, but I don't think there would be any aversion to.
Okay, it's not a position that we would want to turn over regularly unless there was good reason to.
And it's actually a position that
that we articulate a process to fill it as well, because you do not want it to sit empty.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, seeing no further questions from the committee for the bill sponsor, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next witness, favorable with amendments, Shelley Martin.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells and Vice Chair Kerr. I'm Shelley Martin. I'm the current Inspector General for Health. I was appointed last July. I'm the first appointed Inspector General for Health since the agency became independent. Moving it into a statewide Inspector General can be done. We are concerned that it needs to be done with intent, particularly with respect to the current OIGH's Medicaid program integrity functions. These are required by federal law. And required by federal law, we investigate both healthcare providers who have submitted improper claims to the Medicaid system and Medicaid recipients who may have applied for benefits to which they are not eligible. To do that, we have a number of data sharing agreements in place with the Department of Health. It is unclear under this bill if OIGH is no longer an independent entity, what happens to those agreements. And if they lapse, the state is no longer compliant with the terms of its federal Medicaid funding. And I don't think that is anything anyone wants. So if OIGH is to be moved into a statewide OIG, those issues need to be addressed up front so that we can make sure there is no lapse in funding, and that the AI and other services OIGH is currently working on with the Department of Health can continue uninterrupted. There are a number of other issues that we think just need to be clear whether they are intentional or not. Most current OIG staff are not employees at will. Under the new bill, they would become employees at will. If that is what everyone wants, that's fine, but we want to make sure that that is an intentional choice and not just an accident of legislation. We already file an annual report with the General Assembly. There would be a duplicative annual report required under the new bill. That new annual report would include copies of the final results of all of our investigations. That would be about 1,500 pages every year, most of which would be redacted to remove PII and HIPAA-protected information to the point that you all probably wouldn't get much out of it. And I suspect that you are not interested in reading 1,500 pages of recipient Jane Doe did not declare that she had 5 rental properties on her Medicaid application, or Acme Health accidentally submitted a number of 99215s when they should have been using code 99212. I don't think that's useful to you all. We're happy to brief you on that kind of stuff whenever you want it, but we think that this stuff should be worked out in advance so that you don't get that 1,500 pages every year that you don't actually need or want.
Questions for this witness? Not seeing any. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Then that will conclude the bill hearing on House Bill 1064. Delegate Harrison, are you here for House Bill 328?
May I bring my panel up?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Andrea Harrison, and I am here to testify on HB 328. This is a local bill that clarifies the requirements for submitting, maintaining, and providing public access to financial disclosure statements for Prince George's County appointees to the bi-county commissions by adding that the Prince George's County Office of Ethics and Accountability is in the process. Currently, under state law, appointees to bi-county commissions, including the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, and the Washington Suburban Transit Commission, must file a financial disclosure form with a statement, with the State Ethics Commission and submit a paper copy to the Chief Administrative Officer of the county where they seek appointment. The CAO is required to return this financial disclosure statement for unsuccessful candidates retaining filings for appointed commissioners during their term and make them available for public inspection in accordance to state requirements. In 2012, the Prince George's County Office in the Ethics and Accountability was established to provide oversight of county ethics operations, and it supports the County Board of Ethics, including administering county-required financial disclosure statement filings and public access under applicable laws. However, state law was never updated to reflect the OEA's role in handling financial disclosure filings for Prince George's County appointees to bi-county commissions. HB 328 allows the director of the Office of Ethics to become the custodian of the subject financial disclosure forms and allows for much easier access for public inspection. There is an amendment that was offered that is, I guess I can't say it's technical in nature, but I think it's technical in nature. On page 3 of the bill on line 13, after appointed, it inserts the original, and that's all it says. So basically, they have to keep or return the original and all copies of the statement to that application if they were not successful in obtaining that appointment. And so with that, I respectfully request a favorable report on this. And with me today, I have the Prince George's County Director of the Office of Ethics.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Kerr, members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. My name is Todd Turner. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Ethics and Accountability in Prince George's County. Want to thank the opportunity and thank Delegate Harrison for her support of this bill. Also do want to recognize Delegate Lehman as a former colleague as well at local government. Good to see her as well. I would call this in the nomenclature of the General Assembly a departmental bill. It's a technical bill to, in essence, give OEA the authority to handle financial disclosure statements for bi-county commissions. We currently have the Chief Administrative Officer receive those. In practice, she or he would submit those to us, and if somebody were to make a request for those financial disclosure statements, we would provide that consistent with both state law and county law. So this is, in essence, what I would consider a technical bill, as Delegate Harrison indicated. State law was never changed when our office was created back in 2012. And I would say, obviously, it is a local bill. It did pass both the Prince George's and Montgomery County House delegations with the technical amendment that was mentioned. And I would simply ask for your favorable report on this local bill. Thank you.
Do we have questions for the sponsor or her witness?
Mark, I'm waiting on you.
I don't see any. Thank you, Delegate Harrison.
Thank you very much. And I'll just add that Delegate Lehman, myself, and Mr. Turner all served on the Prince George's County Council together. And so we're happy to see him in his space and happy to work with him as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 328. We'll move on to Delegate Kipke with House Bill 354.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 354 is a cross-file of a bill that has passed second reader. There's an amendment to the bill that I hope you have that strikes the bill and leaves this. If the Port of Baltimore seeks to acquire land in Anne Arundel County in the same manner that they notify Anne Arundel County government, they also notify the members of the House and the Senate for Anne Arundel County. Be glad to answer any questions.
I don't see that we have the amendment.
You do not?
Did we get it? Yeah.
You'll have it today.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Delegate Kipke? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 354. Next, we have Delegate Stinnett with House Bill 1177.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Delegate Sean A. Stinnett and a proud member of the Maryland Veteran Caucus and VSBE Advisory Council. For the past 15 years, I have served as the MBE, SBR, VSBE liaison for several state agencies. One of my goals as delegate is to find ways to increase veteran-owned small business enterprise opportunities. Maryland's VSBE program provides contracting opportunities on state-funded procurements for qualified veteran-owned small businesses. Designated agencies and departments are directed to spend at least 3% of the dollar value on their procurement contracts with veteran-certified VSBE firms. When the VSBE program was first introduced, the aspirational goal was 0.5%, then 1%, and now 3%. This increase throughout the years shows growth as well as the great work from DOSM and the person managing the program, Danielle Davis. The purpose of this bill is to require those agencies who participate in the MBE program to participate in the VSBE program if certain procurements are over a designated amount to include a VSBE participation goal. As of today, there are a total of 1,070 registered certified VSBE firms in the state's procurement database, eMaryland Marketplace Advantage. On a daily basis, I receive a series of calls, emails, and office visits from veteran-owned small business owners asking how they can get more engaged in state contracting opportunities. As we grow the MBE program, we must continue to grow the VSBE program. The number of certified vendors in the VSBE program and the diversity of products and services they provide makes a big impact on how VSBE goals are set on a contract. This is a reason why we must provide more opportunities to the veteran-owned business community, which will help increase the VSBE vendor pool and lead to increased VSBE goals on state-funded contracts. With this said, I ask for a favorable report. Thank you for your time and your commitment to strengthening the veteran business community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the delegate? Delegate Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you. With the changes that came out of last year's Procurement Reform Act 25, I think I got that right, where the SBR program was expanded to everything from down to, I think, basically $1 up to, what is it now, 2 million? 1 million, 2 million, I can't remember.
Yeah, zero to a million.
Million, yeah.
Yeah, because it was at 0 to 500,000,
yes.
But now it's to a million.
I haven't been to work in 2 months, so I forgot all this stuff already.
Say it again.
I haven't been to my day job in 2 months, so I've forgotten everything already.
Yeah.
Do you know if we've seen any change? If I would imagine that that with those changes, more VSBEs have been getting contracts. I would imagine. Have we seen any reports yet, or is it too early?
No, I would say it's at least as far as what I've seen, it's too early just yet. But however, I should have mentioned in the beginning that I did submit an amendment as far as in the language of the bill that was first introduced. It's not more of an outreach as far as particularly with those agencies, more within that particular agencies that's procuring a certain procurement and it comes in at a certain dollar amount. That's the term that I'm using as outreach to make sure they're outreaching to the veteran business community who are registered in EMA.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, seeing no more questions for the bill sponsor, that concludes our bill hearing on HB 1177. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
to see you.
Good to see you,
We'll
too.
move on next to Delegate Roberts, HB 1235. Good to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's so nice to say that, Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair Wells, Mr. Chair Kerr, and members of the Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Denise Roberts, here to present House Bill 1235, State Procurement, Competitive Sealed Bids and Proposals in State Evaluation Preference. And this is the House cross file to B 943. And I just want to say, before joining this body, the House of Delegates, I spent 9 years in Prince George's County Office of Central Services in the Supplier Development and Diversity Division, where I was responsible for designing and delivering training for businesses on county certifications and helping small minority-owned firms navigate public procurement. I also work as a small business consultant specializing in MBE certifications and government contracting. So I come to you as someone who knows this process from the inside and from the vendor's side of the table. HB 1235 does something very simple and very transparent. It standardizes how we evaluate competitive sealed bids and proposals when we say we care about best value and Buy Maryland, Buy Local. The bill sets a 100-point framework that every bidder can see upfront. 40 points, up to 40 points for technical merit, up to 30 points for state and local economic impact, 20 points for total cost to the state, and 10 points for past performance. It also requires offerers to submit a straightforward economic impact statement. So how many Marylanders are they employing, whether they will use in-state subcontractors, where the work will be performed, and what tax revenue, job creation, or retention and capital investment they anticipate. From a vendor education perspective, this is not radical. This is Procurement 101. In Prince George's County, we routinely teach firms to respond to clearly defined evaluation factors and to understand how preference and local participation policies show up in the scoring, not in the shadows. HB 1235 brings that same clarity to state procurement by putting the weighting on the table so that a small Maryland contractor, a Black-owned business, or a firm from Western Maryland can look at an RFP and actually see how their in-state jobs and investment will be valued in the award decision. Let me turn directly to the concerns raised in the DGS letter on the Senate crossfile. The opposition letter. First, on the question of lost flexibility and one-size-fits-all, HB 1235 standardizes the categories and their weight ranges, but it does not prevent procurement officers from tailoring the substance of technical criteria to the specific needs of a given project. The technical merit is still 40% of the total score, and within that 40%, agencies can and should define project-specific qualifications, experience, and methods appropriate to a simple commodity buy, a complex IT project, or a construction contract. What the bill does say is that in 2026, best value should always include cost, quality, and the economic value we return to Marylanders, not just lowest price or the most artful technical narrative. Second, on the concern that emphasizing in-state economic impact is somehow a departure from our existing policy. It is actually an implementation of a policy we already claim to believe in. We have long said buy local, and we have codified a robust MBE program, small business preferences, and a procurement reform act that explicitly contemplates in-state considerations in our procurement system. HB 1235 simply moves that value statement into a clear, measurable part of the evaluation instead of burying it in aspirational language or discretionary tiebreakers. Third, DGS raises the issue of workload and templates. I don't dismiss that. I used to be the person who had to update the templates and retrain everyone. But this is the kind of change we already know how to implement. The Office of State Procurement will need to revise standard IFB and RFP templates, update COMAR-aligned guidance, and train procurement officers on how to restructure and score the new factors. That is exactly what the Procurement Reform Act of 2025 already set them up to do: modernize, standardize, and professionalize state procurement under clearer statewide rules. We are not adding a new universe of procurements. We are giving them a consistent, transparent framework for something they already do. They also point to the procurement advisor's required study on in-state preference under the Procurement Reform Act and suggests we should wait. I agree the study is important, especially on reciprocal preference risk. But HB 1235 is not a blunt percentage price preference. It is a best value weighting framework that includes technical merit, cost, past performance, and a defined economic benefits factor that can be calibrated consistent with whatever guidance comes out of that study. If the General Assembly, informed by the procurement advisor, needs to adjust the ceiling on the economic benefits factor or clarify how reciprocal preferences are handled, we can do that in regulation or a targeted amendment. We don't need to keep our evaluation criteria opaque in the meantime. On the fear of triggering other states' reciprocal preferences, as someone who works with certified firms every day, I can tell you Maryland companies are already facing those preferences in other states and localities. The answer is not to unilaterally disarm at home. It is to design our in-state evaluation preference thoughtfully, grounded in the forthcoming study, transparent in how it is applied and balanced across quality, cost, and economic return. HB 1235 gives us that structure and gives Maryland businesses a fair shot at the contracts that their tax dollars are already funding. In short, this bill does not take us from flexible to rigid. It takes us from opaque and discretionary to clear and accountable. It aligns our evaluation practices with our values, supports Maryland workers and Maryland tax base, and levels the playing field for the small minority-owned and local firms so many of us encourage to enter public procurement, but then leave guessing about how awards are really made. And I would just say that our state, we spend over $20 billion in public procurement dollars. The more transparency, the better, and that's what this bill does. And for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 1235.
Great, thank you very much, Delegate, for your bill. Just seeing if we have any questions from the committee. Seeing none, thank you so much, Delegate Roberts. We'll move on to our virtual unfavorable test witness, Danny Mays. Good afternoon, Mr. Mays.
Good afternoon, Chair Wells and members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Danny Mays, and I'm testifying in my personal capacity, having spent the last 18 years working in public procurement in Maryland. This bill is described as a Buy Maryland measure. Let me be clear. I would hope that everyone supports Maryland businesses. I support Maryland businesses. The question before the committee is whether the problem this bill seeks to solve has actually been demonstrated and whether fundamentally altering the state's procurement framework is the right way to address it. Legislation that makes changes of this magnitude should be grounded in clear evidence that the current system is failing. In operation, HB 1235 fundamentally alters sealed bidding by collapsing the distinction between an invitation for bids and a request for proposals. Sealed bidding exists for clear, well-defined requirements where award is made to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder based on objective criteria. The request for proposals method exists when technical trade-offs are appropriate. This bill keeps the label sealed bidding, but replaces its objective award standard with a trade-off scoring model. That shift introduces subjectivity into a framework that was intentionally designed to remain objective. When subjectivity increases, protest risk increases, timelines lengthen, and administrative costs rise. The Department of Legislative Services' own fiscal analysis reached a similar conclusion, warning that the bill is likely to increase procurement costs, extend procurement timelines, and require additional procurement staff to administer. There is also an economic consequence to consider. Maryland is not the largest procurement market in this region. Many Maryland technology and professional services firms compete heavily in larger neighboring states. Embedding a broad in-state scoring preference into statute invites reciprocal action in those larger markets and ultimately shrinks the opportunities available to Maryland firms. Major changes to procurement law should be driven by evidence, not assumptions. For this reason, I respectfully urge an unfavorable report on HB 1235. I have submitted written testimony that details the statutory changes and associated risks, and I encourage the committee to review it. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mays. We have a question from Delegate Tomlinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Danny, nice to see you. Your testimony, your written testimony is really great. You have a lot of details there. I like the table at the end. Can you just go in, you mentioned it briefly, can you go in a little bit more about the risks? One of the things I'm always concerned about is protests and appeals. Can you kind of elaborate on that, on how this is probably going to increase the number of protests and then obviously appeals after that?
Absolutely, Delegate Tomlinson. Thank you for the question. So the invitation for bids process is inherently designed to be based on a set of minimum qualifications, and then we look at, is the bidder responsive? Is the bid responsive? Is the bidder responsible? And then we go to lowest price. What this bill does is seemingly, I don't know if the intent was confused in the way that it was drafted, but it doesn't really draw a distinction between a competitive sealed bid and a competitive sealed proposal. So the way that it reads currently, it seems like the procurement officer would have an awful lot of discretion to bring in their own view of how this 100-point scoring system should go. And my worry is that anytime you introduce that subjectivity, which is why I thought the table was just a really good way to illustrate that. When you introduce that subjectivity, we could have a great number of suppliers now saying that we've made arbitrary or capricious decisions, which is the standard for procurement protests, because this bill introduces the possibility of that subjectivity. So I just, again, I do not want to come across as someone who does not support Maryland businesses. I've lived in Maryland all 42 years of my life. I've served Maryland businesses as a procurement officer for 18 of those years. I just don't believe that the intentions behind this bill will match how it would actually look if it were to pass.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions from the committee, that concludes our bill hearing on HB 1235. We'll move next to Delegate Hornberger, HB 1074.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, thanks for having me. For the record, Kevin Hornberger here on HB 1074. This bill deals with public ethics law, participation, restrictions, and requirements for local government and school boards. So what I'd like everyone to do is sort of think about the ethics disclosures and criteria that we're held to as legislators, right? Filling out your yearly forms, conflicts of interest, basically it's just disclosures. I have an interest in this, I'm on a certain board, I own a company, I own property, and these aren't overly onerous. We all participate in there. They're not that big of a deal. Now, when it comes to procurement, large expenditures, if we look at our roles, more often than not, we are not the individual that is dispersing money, for example. We're not the ones signing off on contracts. We're not the one meeting with lobbyists that are directly tied to procurements that we would exercise, right? We sort of have multiple deferments, or we might go through an agency. The group that we're looking to bring up to the same level that we're at in this bill is municipal governments, county governments, and school boards. The folks that do all of those things that I just described, that are in charge of very large contracts, that approve things that could be seen as a conflict of interest. And I'm not going to name jurisdictions or go into recent cases, but you all follow the news. And more often than not, we see scandals, be it financial, be it conflict of interest, over and over again occurring at the municipal level, at the school board level, and at the county level. That's why we have this bill before us today. This bill would take all of those entities that I just described and put them at the same level as us, right? Right now, we are at the highest level of disclosure, conflict of interest, et cetera. There is no reason that all of the other elected officials at different levels of government should not be at that same level. In other words, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We've also added a provision in here that would extend the nepotism laws that we currently have to sons-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. And again, this was a result of a case that we had locally. So, you know, all of this is based on good government. We're having discussions right now, which I really enjoy, about accountability and about making sure that those dollars are going where we want them to. And this bipartisan bill is a very low fiscal impact, which is just a very minor software upgrade. But I encourage you to read the letters of information from our state ethics board. And this would put everyone in the same posture, and I feel that it's a good government bill. So asking for a favorable report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Delegate. For the bill, Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Delegate, that's a great bill. I wonder, like, for father-in-law, mother-in-law, should that be included as well?
For the
yeah, like you have son-in-law, like.
Yeah, so currently, sons-in-laws and daughters-in-laws are not covered under the nepotism, whereas you could exercise a contract with them, for example, have purview over that contract, and there would be no conflict of interest.
So my point is, should we add like father-in-law and mother-in-law as well? Just extend what you're thinking.
Sure, yeah, make it go both ways, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, this was a direct corollary to a case that we had. So I know that my colleague here in Charles, Coward County, that area, they've had some incidents. This is happening throughout government, right? Like these folks are exercising tens of millions of dollars in some cases, and there are no disclosures, right? Or they're very difficult to find, or they're piecemeal. There's also no teeth, right? There's nothing compelling municipal and county governments to say that, yes, you do and have to fact disclose. And if you don't disclose, here's the repercussion. We just have this patchwork of county ethic boards or town ethics boards, and they have little or no function. So, yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing the bill. Good to see you. So you brought up Calvert County, and it was a question I was kind of holding on to. It's in the bill, and I'm trying to figure out, like, is there a reason why the county independently is called out directly in the bill? Is there just a different process that Calvert County follows than everybody else in the state that they have to be called out individually by county?
So are you talking to the fiscal note?
No, the bill itself has a whole section, the section 55-811.1.
Yeah, my belief, or my understanding, and someone else might be able to add additional detail, is that because they had certain scenarios that occurred, they put themselves in a better posture from a disclosure standpoint.
Gotcha.
And again, that gets back to that patchwork that I just referred to, where we don't have across the board uniformity on what disclosures are required and what happens if they're not done correctly.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Delegate, I have a question. I'm just looking at the testimony from MABE.
Yes, I did see that.
Yep. So just wondering if you could speak to, I think there's 2 points it seems to be that they're making. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that Maryland already provides a comprehensive ethics framework and established removal standards for local boards of education. It's stating that there seems to be a good place and process currently that the Maryland State Board of Education has. So yep. I wonder if you could, I'll ask the second question separately, but if you could speak
I would have 2 observations to that, having dealt with this in my own county. With the State Board of Boards of Education and the county boards, that review group is largely located within the school apparatus. In other words, if I say, hey, my colleague is acting unethically, I would go to another branch within my local school board and make that, assertion, and then they would review it and make a finding, right? The nature of an IG role or an ethics board or any of these groups is that it is an independent third party, right? Mm-hmm. So do they have a process in place? Yes. Do I believe that it meets the rigors that we have to go through? No, I do not.
Okay, so you're saying that your legislation is seeking to create an independent entity?
Yeah, it would all funnel through the State Board of Ethics.
Okay. All right.
And if we look at our budgeting, right, in our counties especially, number one dollar item is the school boards, right? They are dispensing contracts, they're overseeing wages. That is where the money is actually getting spent en masse. And that's why I feel that they should be at the same levels as we are, who have very little influence on these dollars.
All right, thank you.
Looks like we had one more question.
We do. Delegate Fisher.
Yep, thank you, Delegate Hornberger. Yes, Calvert County, the delegation, we passed this bill, worked closely with Dia Daly.
Yes, yep.
It's a closely kind of held county, if you will, and there were a lot of things that weren't, certainly weren't in the up and up. And we're going to have another bill this session dealing with it as well. And that's how this got here. And it was a great bill because we had literally the Democrat Central Committee and the Republican Central Committee here in the legislature and pushed through the bill.
Yeah, well, I thank you for your leadership on that. It's good governance. And it's so good, in fact, that I feel that we should make it statewide. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Seeing no further questions from the committee, this concludes our bill hearing on HB 1074. Thank you very much, Delegate Hornberger. We'll move next to Delegate Miller, HB 1085. Good afternoon, Delegate Miller.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you.
All my friends here. All right. Ready? Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the committee. For the record, I am Delegate April Miller from Frederick County, here to present House Bill 1085, also known as the Maryland Government Efficiency and Accountability Act of 2026. This legislation is a common sense approach to one of the biggest complaints we hear from our constituents. The government is too big, too opaque, and too often unaccountable for how it spends taxpayer dollars. House Bill 1085 establishes the Maryland Office of the Inspector General, the OIG, to serve as an independent watchdog over state agencies. Why does this matter? While we have individual inspectors general for certain departments like education or health, we lack a centralized independent office with the broad authority to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse across the entirety of the executive branch. And as we sit here in 2026, our state budget has grown to historic levels, and with that growth comes an increased risk of inefficiency. House Bill 1085 ensures that we are not just spending money, but spending it rightly. The OIG is established as in the bill, the OIG is established as an independent unit of state government with the Inspector General appointed by the newly created State Transparency Commission, not the governor, ensuring the office has the teeth to investigate the very administration that oversees the budget. The OIG is empowered to investigate the complaints of fraud, waste, and mismanagement of state funds, and it would have subpoena power. To be effective, a watchdog needs to be able to follow the trail, and this bill provides the necessary tools to conduct thorough investigations and report findings directly to the General Assembly and the public. The fiscal note estimates a cost to staff this office, but I ask the committee to consider what the cost of inaction is. We have had an unbelievable amount of audits that have come back with repeat findings and millions, if not billions, of dollars in findings, including the $3.4 billion in federal fund accruals across agencies like MDH and MTA, and we have lost millions to improper payroll payments and phantom employees who remained on the books after leaving state employment. And in states where a centralized OIG exists, the office often pays for itself many times over by identifying either phantom programs, administrative bloat, fraudulent contracts. The fiscal note also reflects the initial setup costs, but it cannot fully quantify the millions in dollars of potential taxpayer savings that would result from a more efficient and accountable government. So if this office just saved 1% of the $8.5 billion currently spent without oversight, it would have paid for itself into the next century. Now, I have not done the math on that, so I'm just hoping that's true. This is an ultimate ROI for the Maryland taxpayer because we are currently facing a crisis of confidence in our state government. And for years, the Office of Legislative Audits has sounded the alarm about the systemic mismanagement going on, but without the centralized Inspector General powers to investigate and intervene in real time, these warnings have just simply been filed away while taxpayer dollars continue to vanish. Because the OLA looks at the books after the money is spent. It's a post-audit. The OIG would investigate the people and the intent while the money is being spent. And as I mentioned, 25% of the most recent audit cycles were repeat findings from the last 3 years. And current auditors also cannot easily compel a private contractor to hand over internal emails, and OIG can. I do want to address the recent and abrupt letting go of the Inspector General for Education that came out of the, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but there was an MSDE audit in January of 2026, and very shortly thereafter, there was a firing. And what that does is that sends a chilling message. It sends a chilling message to every watchdog or watchdog group in Annapolis. And it maybe says, if you dig too deeply into the wrong places, you might be gone. So current IGs in Maryland often serve at the pleasure of the very executives that they oversee, and it creates an inherent conflict of interest. HB 1085 removes the politics from the process by placing the appointment and removal power to an independent state transparency commission. And that way ensuring the IG answers to the taxpayers and the law, not a political benefactor. So at a time when Marylanders are struggling with an affordability crisis, from rising energy costs to property tax assessments, we owe it to them to ensure their tax dollars aren't being siphoned off by waste or incompetence. House Bill 1085 is about restoring trust. It's about saying that in Maryland, the taxpayer comes first. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 1085. Let's give Marylanders the accountability that they deserve.
Thank you very much, Delegate. We have a question from Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Delegate, for bringing the bill forward. Just a quick technical cleanup question. The Maryland Judiciary issued a letter with outlining a few concerns on processes here.
Yeah.
Do you consider those to be friendly suggestions on things that need to be cleaned up in the bill, or are there
Happy to look at, because this was just, like I said, this attempt at the bill is my attempt to establish the office. Happy to take the suggestions that are needed to streamline.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Delegate. Okay, seeing no further questions from the committee, thank you, Delegate, for the bill and presentation. We will move on to our next bill of the day, Delegate Naraki, HB 1449. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. All right, good afternoon, committee. For the record, I am Delegate Ryan Naraki, and I am asking for a favorable report on House Bill 1449, which is titled the Statewide Office of Inspector General. HB 1449 establishes a statewide office of the Inspector General to provide independent, professional, and nonpartisan oversight of Maryland state government. This legislation is grounded in a simple principle. Marylanders deserve confidence that their government operates with integrity, transparency, and accountability. Today, Maryland has internal audits and investigative functions within certain agencies. Still, we lack a centralized independent office with the authority and responsibility to identify systemic risks, investigate allegations of waste, fraud, and abuse and misconduct, and recommend reforms across state government. HB 1449 fills that gap. This bill creates an independent Inspector General appointed through a transparent process with statutory independence, fixed terms, and protections against political interference. The office would have the authority to conduct audits, evaluations, and investigations, issue public reports, refer matters for administrative or criminal action when appropriate, and recommend reforms to prevent future problems. Importantly, the legislation includes clear jurisdictional boundaries and due process protections to ensure fairness and avoid duplicating existing oversight. A statewide inspector general strengthens, not weakens, our agencies by identifying vulnerabilities before they become crises, improving internal controls, and promoting best practices. The office will help the government operate more efficiently and effectively. At both the federal level and in many other states, inspectors general have consistently returned savings to the taxpayers that far exceed the cost of their operations. Maryland taxpayers deserve that same level of stewardship. HB 1449 also provides important protections for whistleblowers, allowing individuals to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Protecting those who come forward in good faith is essential to maintaining ethical and accountable government. Ultimately, this bill is about public trust. Establishing an independent office of the Inspector General sends a clear message to Marylanders that we welcome scrutiny, we value accountability, and we are committed to ensuring that taxpayer dollars are used responsibly. For these reasons, I respectfully ask for a favorable report of HB 1449. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Delegate Naraki. Delegate Lehman.
Delegate, good to see you. Yours is the, I guess, third IG bill we've heard today. I was just curious, it's the first one I've had a chance to look at the fiscal note on, and I don't know if they're the same for all three, but do you agree with the premise of the math that they come up with of the net effect? It looks like next fiscal year, 2027, 1.82 million, and that's, I guess, after moving around money and positions from the IG for health and education. Does that make, can you explain that, and do you agree with it?
Sure, Doug. Yes, I did get a chance to see the fiscal note. There's no question that there will be a cost to creating an office like this. My bill is somewhat different, I think, than some of the other bills that have been presented today as well, because there is a commission that's established, an independent commission. So obviously there would be a cost associated with that as well. I would add, though, in certain jurisdictions, for instance, around Maryland, where we have inspector generals, like Montgomery County, for instance, that inspector general puts out great reports. She has saved taxpayers in that county tens of millions of dollars more every year than that cost there that we're talking about, that 1.8 million. So not to diminish that cost, but I think that the net effect could actually end up being a net positive to the state's budget.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Naraki, thank you for bringing the bill. And I will say, I guess I'm a little late in raising the point, but I did just want to get it on the record. A previous colleague who was here presenting the bill, I just wanted to say, and I am somebody who has, I worked with Senator Kramer a couple of years ago, and we authorized the Montgomery County Inspector General to cover MCPS because we really believe in transparency, and I'm an audit nerd. It's been a blessing and a curse being the Joint Audits co-chair and the work that we're doing on our committee. I did just want to get on the record. So isn't this so that, you know, there's a reference made to the Inspector General for the Department of Education for MSDE. That Inspector General served for an extra year past his term ending. His term actually ended last January in 2025, and the governor allowed him to stay on for another year. He was appointed by the previous governor, the previous Republican governor, and the two, both Attorney General and the Treasurer. The Treasurer and the Attorney General and the governor appoint collectively the IG, and they have obviously they have appointed a new person. So I just wanted to get on the record that wasn't necessarily because of an audit. Clearly, he had served for at least a year, and I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record. Isn't that so?
Yeah, and Delegate, to that point, I know that gentleman. He actually happens to be a constituent of mine, so he's a fine gentleman. This bill, though, I know that was probably directed to the previous. I
was a little late on my button.
Sure, and that's totally fair, Delegate. This legislation was crafted before that even happened, so it didn't have anything to do with that for me. It's just about, you know, good government and transparency here, not that circumstance there.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, seeing no further questions from the committee, we'll move on to some additional favorable testimony in person. We have Fitzgerald Mofer, and we have a few virtual witnesses as well.
My name is Fitzgerald Mofor, and I'm pleased to support Delegate Ryan Nowacki's legislation to create an Inspector General's office in Maryland. Establishing this office is crucial. A comprehensive review of budget closeout transactions for 2025 uncovered $3.5 billion in federal funds that were inadequately documented and lacked proper support. Furthermore, a report found that the State Highway Administration knowingly charged $358 million in unauthorized expenses to federal projects. In March 2025, another report identified that the Department of Juvenile Services spent $125 million on direct voucher payments that bypassed normal controls for tracking fund usage. Another report highlights $760 million in uncollectible unemployment benefits. The Division of Unemployment Insurance did not recover these funds in a timely manner and lacked proper procedures for supervisory oversight to prevent fraud. Additionally, millions of dollars are sent to nonprofits who do not comply with state solicitation laws. It is evident that waste, fraud, and abuse are widespread in Maryland to the detriment of taxpayers. It is also clear that Maryland lawmakers, such as Delegate Wu, have neglected their duty to be responsible stewards of public funds, relying on the Office of Legislative Audits or the Chief Performance Office under Governor Moore to...
Please don't impugn the members of this committee.
But it's a legitimate grievance.
I just asked you to refrain, that's all.
Yeah, it's a legitimate grievance, though.
I just asked you to refrain. You can be excused, Mr. Mofar. Thank you very much. That's in your testimony.
I will be.
Not allowed to finish my testimony? No.
Why am I not allowed to finish my testimony?
I just asked you to refrain from impugning the motives of the members of the committee. It's either you stop doing it.
I won't. I don't. It's a proper grievance. The taxpayers where their money is being used unjustly.
We'll move on to our virtual witness, Mr. John Didi. Didi, thank you very much.
That's
you have 2
okay.
minutes.
Today, I'm here to speak on behalf of this legislation for the establishment of the Maryland Office of the Inspector General. We have a situation in Maryland where a whistleblower has reported wrongdoing regarding Maryland's SNAP program. Governor Moore said those allegations are not true, and an investigation will be made public, but nothing's happened. Recently, the governor selected his current deputy counsel to serve as the new Education Inspector General, following questions about the independent oversight of state spending. How far will they really look into the blueprint? There have been many questions raised over the last couple of years regarding Medicaid spending in Maryland, and many people at CMS have questioned Maryland and their Medicaid practices not verifying income of applicants. Government shouldn't be afraid of oversight. It should demand it. Money is the taxpayers' money that is being spent and sometimes misused in some cases. Maryland needs an independent watchdog for the taxpayer to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. Currently, some of our largest jurisdictions have established their own independent special investigative units as far as inspector generals, and the taxpayers have loved it and rewarded it. Transparency and accountability are something taxpayers should expect out of government, not beg for it. Marylanders work too hard for their money to have it wasted. The state misuse of public funds gets a lot of attention, and Inspector General can prevent this from happening. Inspector Generals are friends of the taxpayer. They are the government watchdogs that make sure the money is being spent where it should be, and no shenanigans are occurring with the money that is delegated, spent in certain areas. Citizens trusted Baltimore County Inspector General Kelly Madigan and rallied to her when Kathy Klossmeyer tried to fire her. People need to feel trust in state and local government, having taught this subject for over 30 years. And having an inspector general in the state would ensure how Maryland's finances are being spent. At least 12 states have already established this type of office. Finally, I urge passage of this legislation to protect the state's bond rating and taxpayers.
Thank you very much for your testimony. All right, seeing no questions from the committee, this concludes our bill hearing. Thank you for your testimony this afternoon.
You're welcome.
I'm so sorry. Yes, this does include our bill hearing on HB 1449. Ms. Isabel Cumming is not, she was listed to testify. Is she, okay, well, I'll double check because she wasn't previously. She's not in the waiting room. It's, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our next bill. Thank you, Delegate Naraki. We'll move on to our next bill, which is HB 1165. Delegate Williams, I believe, her staff is here to present the bill. And is there a sponsor panel? Yes, okay. I have listed Roger Mano, Christopher Biondi, and Joshua Roycroft.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair Wells, Vice Chair Kerr, and members of the House Government, Labor, and Elections Committee. I'm Michael Marino, Chief of Staff to Delegate Nicole Williams, and I will be testifying in favor of House Bill 1165, also known as State Procurement, Apprenticeship Program Accountability and Completion. This bill requires certain apprenticeship programs utilized in certain state procurements to have at least a 25% completion rate as determined by the Maryland Department of Labor. The state of Maryland invests heavily in prevailing wage construction for important projects such as school, transportation, and infrastructure. Unfortunately, too many apprenticeship programs fail to graduate their participants, with completion rates in some programs falling beneath 10%. Such poor completion rates often indicate poor instruction, inadequate supervision, or a program that is created solely to reduce labor costs. This bill ensures that Maryland's apprenticeship system adheres to a higher standard in delivering on its promise of meaningful training and bright future careers. By ensuring that apprenticeship programs meet a minimum completion rate of 25% before assigning apprentices to publicly funded projects, the state guarantees that taxpayer dollars are supporting legitimate workforce development and the next generation of skilled Maryland workers. This legislation incentivizes workforce performance and creates accountability where none currently exists. For these reasons, myself and my delegate urge you to give a favorable report on House Bill 1165. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joshua Roycroft. I'm a 13-year member of Local 486 Plumbers and Steam Fitters, and I graduated from their apprenticeship program. I've instructed at our facility now for 3 years, and last year I accepted the position of training coordinator. I'm fully in support of House Bill 1165 because it promotes accountability in apprenticeship programs that benefit from public projects. Apprenticeships are one of the most important pathways into the skilled trades. They provide people with the opportunity to earn while they learn and develop the skills necessary to become highly qualified journeymen and women. When the state requires apprenticeship participation in publicly funded projects, it is making an investment in workforce development. However, that investment should also come with a reasonable expectation of results. House Bill 1165 establishes what I consider to be a very modest standard by requiring apprenticeship programs involved in certain state contracts to maintain at least a 25% completion rate. This requirement helps ensure that programs are not simply registering apprentices, but are actually supporting them through to completion. Local 486's experience demonstrates why accountability is both achievable and appropriate. Over the past 7 years, our apprenticeship program has averaged a 77% completion rate, with graduates continuing to work as journeymen and women within Local 486. In the current year, we are on track to reach an 81% completion rate, and we expect to onboard at least 100 new apprentices into our program in the spring. A completion benchmark encourages programs to focus on mentorship, training quality, and long-term success for apprentices. At the same time, the bill maintains flexibility for contractors by allowing them to contribute to qualified apprenticeship programs or the State Apprenticeship Training Fund when participation is not feasible. House Bill 1165 strengthens Maryland's apprenticeship system by promoting transparency, accountability, and real workforce development outcomes while preserving options for contractors working on public projects. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to give House Bill 1165 a favorable report. Thank you very much for your time.
Chairman and honorable delegates, my name is Chris Biondi. I am the training director for Plumbers and Gas Fitters Local 5 Apprenticeship. That is an 80-year-old apprenticeship in the state of Maryland. I have been tied to the apprenticeship for 22 years, and I'm currently the training director. I am in support of House Bill 1165, strongly in favor. If we, as an organization, if I delivered less than a 50% success rate from my first year on to fifth year, I would be fired. If I delivered less than a 65 to 75% success rate, moving from second years to fifth years, I would be fired as well, and my bosses would be right to do so. We are bringing in 150 apprentices or more this year. We're going to graduate anywhere from 80 to 120 of those apprentices over the course of 5 years. And holding that standard is absolutely critical into maintaining the concept of a productive apprenticeship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Chair Ruth, members of the committee. Roger Mano, attorney at Mano & Associates, on behalf of the Mid-Atlantic Pipe Trades Association, which is the regional affiliate of the United Association, representing steam fitters, plumbers, gas fitters, pipe fitters, and their signatory contractors represented by the Mechanical Contractors Association of Metro Washington, about a $2 billion annual economic footprint, 200 signatory contractors under that umbrella. We want to thank, first of all, Delegate Williams for sponsoring this legislation. We'd like to thank Department of Labor for their work on this legislation. There may be a reprint before you all. If not, one is forthcoming. The administration supports the bill, and we support their amendments. This is a minor bill to ensure that the scarce taxpayer dollars that are going into the state procurement system are actually advancing the policies that we want to advance, which is to ensure that the jobs that are created through those scarce taxpayer dollars actually graduate apprentices, and that they that those lead to highly skilled journey persons at the end of that apprenticeship training program, and that the apprenticeship training programs that are in place for the purposes of bidding on contracts are not stood up just for the purposes of bidding on that contract. In the case where those where that happens, those apprentices are hired. They begin a training program for that specific project. When the project ends, after a thing is built in 6 months or a year, that program goes away and that apprentice has no transferable skills. So this bill ensures a very, very moderate or modest graduation rate, and we'd ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any? Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, or thanks to Delegate Williams for this bill. So what is the relevance of the 25% rate? Where did that number come from? I'm just curious, because in the fiscal note, it says the Maryland Department of Labor does not calculate completion rates for these apprenticeship programs. I understand that it says it can within its current budget, so that's not what I'm not raising the budget question, but where did the 25% number come from? I mean, why not 50%, for example?
Well, I represent many contractors and unions that have much higher percentage rates. And in an effort to begin this process, to sort of oversee those programs, to ensure that they're actually real programs, functional programs, and that they advance the objectives of our procurement system, we thought that 25% would be a floor, of just a minimal percentage that would advance those policies. And there's two training directors here who can answer in terms of the statistics of graduation rates better than I can. But thank you, Delegate.
But you're not concerned that's too low, or it's just a starting point?
We'll leave that up to the committee. We would certainly support a higher threshold.
Okay, and then one quick follow-up, Madam Chair, if I might. And so is part of the goal then to increase the revenues going into the State Apprenticeship Training Fund, or would that just be sort of a benefit of this bill?
When I served in this body back in 2008 or 2009, we created that fund through a bill called the Apprenticeship Opportunities Act. It was my bill, and that bill said that you had to have a certified apprenticeship training program, which to some contractors was a new thing, or pay into a fund which would advance certified apprenticeship training programs. This bill overlays another criteria upon that, which is that not only would you have to have a certified apprenticeship training program, but that program would have to graduate a certain threshold of apprentices. That's not a requirement to bid on contracts. You certainly don't have to have a certified apprenticeship training program. You can opt to participate in the apprenticeship fund if you choose to go that way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Delegate Schindler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That brings me to sort of a follow-up question, and it's along those lines. As I'm sure each field has a different length of time for apprenticeships, but do you have any statistics of maybe professions that do track that, of what the graduation rate looks like for the apprenticeship programs?
For anyone other than ours.
I can speak to that as far as plumbing and pipe trades in general across the state of Maryland. If you start from first year, which is arguably, we're dealing with young people that have not necessarily made up their mind, they're not sure. It sounds good, but they might wind up being a dentist or a long haul trucker or whatever. Counting from there, we're at 65%. Counting from second year, when people are like, okay, I've taken ownership of this career. Last year we were at 85%, and that was kind of a light year for us. So maintaining that standard, we know that there are models that work. It takes a lot of heavy lifting from my team and the people that support us to make sure we're finding the right people that are going to be good candidates or successful, nurturing them, supporting them as they come through, not just educationally, but with some of the social things that come up in a young person's life. So that's only from my little slice of the trades.
May I ask one short follow-up? So would the intent of this bill then to be 25% of the first year or of the entire apprenticeship program?
So the Department of Labor reprint, or the amendments from Department of Labor, take into consideration programs that are just getting started that don't have a graduation rate yet. It refers to those as cohorts in the reprint. So there's I guess a carve out for new apprenticeship training programs so they're not unfairly penalized by the bill as implemented. And thereafter, the clock would start to toll in terms of their graduation rate.
Okay, but that would be for the entire program or for just like a first year? One of the established programs?
After the first year, then it would, procurement would look at the percentage, the overall percentage of graduated apprentices under that contractors program.
Perfect, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions from the committee, this concludes the favorable testimony on HB 1165.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Moreno. We have one favorable with amendments, Matt Tafoe. I do not see him. Don't see him here, but so with that, this concludes our bill hearing for HB 1165. And this concludes our bill hearings for today. Just checking with my subcommittee chair to see if there are any announcements. Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned for today. Thank you, everyone.